Well, welcome everybody. This is the Fat Paramotor Podcast. I am your host. Well, I'm the Fat Paramotor guy, but you can call me Shaun. In the studio as well, we've got a young whippersnapper. He's the co-host, and we've got Daniel Jones. Daniel, welcome. How's things going?
Hi, Shaun. Yeah, doing well tonight. Excited to get this podcast off the ground and going.
Yeah, isn't it exciting, eh? The idea of doing a podcast. We've been talking about this for quite a while now. We've had a few rehearsals and chats and bits and pieces, and we've had this lockdown thing, and this is it now. We're actually going to have a crack at recording a podcast and see how it goes. Pretty exciting, eh?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how, like you say, we'll see how it goes, and hopefully we can provide some entertainment for everyone out there and people enjoy it.
Awesome stuff, mate. What have you been up to paramotoring recently?
Well, it's been a bit of a funny one, really, because of all the lockdowns and stuff that we've had. I've just been working through the content that I've racked up over last year. Had a great flying season last year with all the furlough and stuff. Managed to get out quite a bit. Went to the championships and just been editing videos for that, really, at the moment. Waiting to get back in the sky.
Good stuff, mate. Well, I think everybody's about ready to go, aren't they? I know Wingland Airfield up here, they opened a couple of days ago for solo flying, you know, people flying as individuals, and everybody's trying to crack back into it. It's been a tough year, but here we are. But anyway, so we've got a theme for the podcast today. We're going to talk about learning to fly. I know a lot about learning to fly because I've spent most of my paramotoring career learning to fly and things, but that's what we're going to talk over at the moment. So, Daniel, I think we should talk first up by talking about lessons and things. Who taught you to fly?
So, as you've just said, the Winglands have opened. I actually trained at Wingland with Mike Chilvers. His school, You Fly for Fun.
Oh, Chile.
Yeah, good old Chile. It did start before that, though. So I was probably interested in the whole paramotor thing a couple of years before I actually took official training and taught myself how to ground handle to a point of being able to add the motor. So I was pretty much there. It did take a lot longer than it would have done from what I've seen from students excelling within a week to flying, you know.
Yeah, so you started off teaching yourself to ground handle. I did a bit of that as well. It all started with whiskey. Somebody bought me a bottle of whiskey one night. This is when I was living in Australia. I was talking to my mate on by text message and things on the phone, drinking this whiskey, and he was drinking Sambuca, I think it was, back at his house. And when we woke up in the morning, we'd bought a paramotor together. And I think the first ever video that I did was me trying on this paramotor, and then after that I bought a wing, and my first lessons was the same. That was learning to ground handle and things, and self-taught, and it didn't it didn't go that well, but you progressed a bit faster, I think, eh?
Well, like I said, it took me sort of about 2 years. But yeah, I've definitely got some stories from trying to ground handle. I remember the first day just not even really knowing how to get out of the bag and get it inflated. So, you know, you'd get that straight away with a trainer, wouldn't you? Yeah. And I imagine you've got some stories as well about, you know, ground handling and going back to schools and...
I actually learned with a flying school called Tribal Flight in Queensland in Australia. And the instructor there was a guy called Matt Fox. And I really enjoyed my training in Australia. I think it's different to the training they do here in the UK. And but my first ever lesson was I just had a day with him, a free day. And his words were, come and spend a day. It's free. I need to assess you and see whether you're trainable in a way. That's kind of what I was looking for. And if we get on, I'll teach you. And it was more or less like that. So that was my first ever experience. So I had a day where he showed me how to sort of the basics of ground handling. And then I never saw him for a year because I moved from Brisbane to Cairns in Australia, which is about 1,500 miles away. So I ended up then just spending a year teaching myself to ground handle and things. And it was frustrating, mate. It was frustrating.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. But even that first initial free training day, like that, when you get those fundamentals, to start with.
Yeah.
That you can inflate a wing and you can have a play and see what works. You won't necessarily catch on as quick in that sense because you haven't got someone over your shoulder saying, oh, you need to pull this brake and you need to move this way to make it work. But at least you've sort of got a bit of a foundation there. I remember myself like struggling with that because we were like running like hell, like with the wind, against the wind, crosswind. And I do remember one Christmas morning, we'd got so fed up with trying to ground handle in like lower winds that me and my brother actually took this wing out on Christmas Day over the wreck that was pretty much joined to the house at the time. And it was probably blowing like 20 gusting 30, and I got picked 6 feet off the ground and thought, this is it. I'm going to absolutely hurt myself here. Something's going to go wrong. So there is something to be said for a bit of a lesson.
Yeah, I think I did have that advantage. I mean, being shown the basics, how to hold the lines, in which way you hold them, how to inflate the wing, and, he showed me reverse launch and forward launch on that day. In actual fact, on the first day, he had me running across the field with the wing above my head in one day. So I thought, oh, this is great. I know how to do this. This is really easy. But it just shows the value of good instruction, because I didn't do that out of any natural skill at all. I did that because Matt Fox was telling me what I was doing wrong and was correcting me and showed me how to do it. So at the end of one day lesson, I was running Fat Paramotor run, which is basically a brisk chicken walk, but with this wing above my head and feeling the weight of the wing, and remembering telling me just to load the wing a bit with the brake so you can feel it. And then when I went away and got my own wing, I couldn't get the blasted thing to fly. So then I spent half the year convincing myself it was the wing that I'd got that was a load of rubbish, and it wasn't. It was just lack of having that person in my ear, lack of having those skills and things. And it took me a long time then on my own to sort of get the knack of getting the wing in the air. And I kind of got there in the end, but it was a long process without somebody giving me some assistance.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It definitely is an elongated process given that you haven't got that person there. I've seen, Aviator in the States, in Florida, one of their key phrases that they say to their students is, be a good robot. And it's so true, having that instructor telling you what to do, you will inevitably do the right thing to keep you safe and essentially fly,
Yeah, absolutely. But that brings on to then self-training. What do you think to self-training, Daniel?
I've seen some self-trained pilots. I am to a degree, but I wouldn't class myself as a self-trained pilot by any means. It's worrying. If I was to put it in a couple of words, it's worrying to see that the fact that people still want to do that, whether that's lack of funds or they're just a bit anti-establishment. Either way, we've got some really good trainers in the UK and in America as well to give that training. Why not? Why would you not do it safely?
Yeah,
is my viewpoint on that from having training.
Yeah. I totally agree. My take on it is, look, if you want to train yourself, that's kind of fine. I'm not against telling people that you shouldn't self-train, but at the same time, I think you should understand the risks of self-training. Now, the problem with self-training is it's not actually that hard to fly a paramotor. But a lot of the lessons, it's about those safety aspects of things that you don't realize exist until somebody teaches you how to do them. It's like learning to drive, isn't it? The driving the car is only kind of 5% of it. The rest of it is all that road procedure and the skills and the safety and things. And that's what worries me. Now, if you want to do it, and that's what you want to do, and I get that, because some people want to teach themselves part of the challenge, and it's like people who want to free climb buildings without ropes and things like that. If you want to do it, that's absolutely fine, but don't try to claim to the rest of us that it's actually a good idea to do it. It might be what you've chose to do, but I think for everyday people, there are so many lessons that Matt Fox taught me about safety about deflating wings that get out of control, about what to do when things happen in the air, what to do when you get a cravat in the air, if you end up with a collapse, if you end up in a parachutal stall, those kind of things, and I think if you don't have the structure of the lesson, you put yourself at risk. And the lessons, really, the whole course that I took in Australia is based around the lessons that the Australian hang gliding sort of federation, I forget what they call it, the HGFA, they used to be called the Hang Gliding Federation Australia. It's all the lessons that they learnt from all the injuries and the accidents that had happened within that sport in Australia. So they were reflecting on that, and it's reflective learning based on the accidents other people have had. And I think if you ignore those lessons, or if you don't get those lessons, you put yourself in danger. That's my take on it. But if you want to do it, it's up to you. But don't preach to other people that this is a great idea. That's my take. I don't know whether you agree with me, mate.
I do agree with you. And I've had, given that I post videos on YouTube, I do get on the odd occasion people coming in and asking, how do I learn to fly and what do I need to do?
Yeah.
And my response tends to always be, look, it's deregulated. You don't need a license in the UK specifically, and you don't actually need to get lessons. However, it's so strongly advised that you take it under your own jurisdiction of whether you do go with lessons or not.
Yeah.
You'll definitely get flying a lot quicker with proper training. And that's fundamentally what we want to be doing, isn't it? Flying.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'd like to do, Daniel. I don't do much of that these days. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I also think, well, if there's a budget problem, well, paramotoring is probably the cheapest form of aviation that there is. But at the end of the day, I think there's you have to understand to do this hobby safely. There's a minimum spend and a minimum budget that you've kind of got to sort out for yourself. It's a bit like driving on roadworthy cars, isn't it? If you're going to drive a car, you don't have to have a flash expensive thing, but you certainly need to have the minimum requirement of tax insurance, MOT, roadworthy vehicle, and those kind of things. And I think if you're saying, oh, look, I can't afford to do the flight training, and it's not a snobbery, but I think, what you're actually saying is I really can't afford to do this hobby safely. That's the way that I see it. And I would advise anybody, do the flight training then and buy the gear later, rather than buy the gear and not do the training. That's what I think. How many people have accidents? I don't know, who are untrained compared to trained. I've not seen the statistics at all. Have you seen any of that, Dan?
I'm not hot up on the statistics, but regardless of whether people are trained or not, I know that in the UK, the BHPA are the association that attend those instances and give the report on those after a full inspection, whether that's reported to them or not, from scale of someone rolling their ankle to someone actually, potentially losing their life, which it does happen. And it's funny you should say there's a minimum spend. When I went about it, I was under the illusion that, I can buy this cheap paramotor and I can repair it to a certain degree because I've done mechanics on small motorbikes and actually my own cars and stuff like that. Quite mechanically minded. Went through the whole process of trying to get an old, outdated piece of technology running. Still sits in the garage, actually, never flown, and I've had 2 more paramotors since that. So you're right. There is a minimum spend, really, and it's also a minimum spend of knowledge of what you can buy that's still in a good condition as well. Someone fresh coming into this sport, looking at a piece of kit, might see what they think is a good deal, might not actually be a good deal through lack of knowledge. So.
Yeah, and this kind of buying your first gear as well, that's something, that's a trap I fell into or I walked into myself, because everybody told me before I went out and bought gear, don't buy your gear until you've learned to fly and you've had advice from your instructor. Everybody told me that, and I'm supposed to be sensible, It's those that know me, out of paramotoring, considered me to be a fairly intelligent and sensible guy. But I ignored every single one of them. So what did I do? I went out and bought a paramotor. I mean, I will, confess that I was pissed that day on the whiskey and things, but I bought this paramotor, 5,000 Aussie dollars, by the way. That's about, £3,500. Just bought this paramotor, and that's without a wing. And I've still got it. And to be honest with you, I think when I look now at the tragedy of my paramotor journey, because it is, if anybody's ever followed the vlog, I probably put it down to one thing. It's got nothing to do with my physical prowess or my lack of ability. I mainly put it down to the fact I went out and bought a paramotor before I'd taken advice, and I bought the completely wrong paramotor, and I actually believe I bought the wrong wing as well, because I had no problems flying the gear that I was given by my instructor that he selected for me, and out of the myriad of wings that he had in his shed, no problems at all. But my paramotor, I can't get it anywhere near the sky.
And that sort of sums up the beauty of going for training first, is that you will be on equipment that's right for you, and your instructor probably would have different wings and stuff as well for you to use. Most schools nowadays stock all of that equipment. I wish I'd saved a bit more money and just gone straight into training personally, but this isn't supposed to be a preach on people should or shouldn't do what they want, but it's just from reflecting back on my own experiences, having actually saved a bit more money and waited and been patient, I could have been in the air a lot quicker.
Yes, completely agree. If I was going to do it again, I would have bought nothing, and I would have just gone down and done the training and with Matt Fox. And then at the end of the training, I would have said, Matt, what do I need to fly now? And Matt would have probably sold me the gear. And I know there's some bias in that, because people always say, oh, yeah, they're just there to sell you the gear. Well, at the end of the day, I think if you're flying equipment, if you've learned to fly equipment that your instructor has provided for you, and I don't believe that they've just decided to represent that gear for no reason. They represent that gear because they've got some faith in it. And that's the gear that you learned to fly on, and you've been flying for, I had to do, I think it was 20 hours, I can't remember now, 20 hours flying to get my certificate in Australia. So I flew 20 hours on this gear, and you'd like to think at the end of it, when, I was patted on the back and shook hands and said, congratulations, you get your license in Australia to fly a paramotor. Would you like to buy the gear you've been flying for the last 20 hours? And I think what I would have done then is said, yes, please, grab the gear that I'd been flying, go straight home and be flying in it straight away. But I didn't do that. Yeah. Look at the problems I've had.
And it just goes to say that, if you've been flying that gear for 20 hours, you know that equipment, you're comfortable on that setup. So when you do end up eventually going away on your own and flying, you should have that bit of confidence with that equipment, and that it can fly you. Just jumping back into the rebuild that I did, if I was to go back to that project, and I hope to one day, I don't know if it'd be safe or not, realistically. And I do know about paramotors now, so there is that way in flying that gear and knowing it. And then once you've flown it for a bit, by that time you'll have built up a bit more experience with other equipment. I would have thought that you can make a better informed decision and try out different gear if you want to. So you've got that knowledge behind you by then.
Yeah, definitely. I think, get your lessons, buy the gear off your instructor, or buy what he recommends or she recommends. I've never seen any female instructors thinking about that, but I'm sure there are some kicking around. Buy what he or she recommends, get some airtime on that, and then you can you can spread your wings, as they say, and try other equipment and stuff. Brings me on to another thing I was thinking about then. So what's your thoughts, Daniel, on inexperienced instructors? It just seems to me, and I can think of a couple of names of people who seem to have had less experience than me, learn to fly a paramotor, and then decide to become an instructor. How does that sit?
unless you know about them, you don't know about them, and that's the danger of it.
Absolutely.
We're talking here about people fresh into the sport, most likely.
Yeah.
So they haven't been around on the forums, or they haven't been to a paramotor flying yet, and they haven't spoken to, the local flyers.
Yeah.
People who jump into this sport and straight away become an instructor, they might have, that probably not the best interest at the forefront of their mind. Instructors need to make money. That's their job. At the end of the day, they will. But I think there's a level of responsibility that comes with that, and you should have a degree of flying skill behind you before you can teach someone.
Yes.
And it's scary that because it is a deregulated sport, you don't actually necessarily need that skill to train anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I could train someone tomorrow. Would it be as efficient and as fulfilled as a proper instructor that's, been doing it for several years and have a lot of years of flying skill behind them? Probably not.
Yeah, I would agree, because there's more to being an instructor than being a good pilot as well. It's and again, I remember with Matt Fox and Tribal Flight. Matt Fox was a member of the committee or whatever it was for the Hang Gliding Federation of Australia, so he was involved in the meetings and the reflections on accidents and identifying the training needs and things like that. So being a good pilot, you don't often think about those things. Also delivering, flying lessons, delivering it safely, because it's one thing me knowing how to fly safely, but how do you protect a naive student who puts their lives in your hand? And they do. And, there has been incidents of students being killed, as students under instruction. And I find that worrying, because my thoughts are this: if you want to self-train, you've got the capacity to make that decision. You have autonomy. You make that decision to do it. If you want your best mate or your mate who flies a paramotor to show you how to do it, well, all understand that is also self-training. But if you want tuition, as far as I'm concerned, if you are going to pay for tuition, that's a completely different thing. That's a commercial aspect. And I find it surprising there's no regulation behind paid tuition, because there's an issue with paid tuition. If I pay somebody to teach me to do something, there's an assumption there, whether that's right or wrong, that person is professionally safe and will look after my welfare, and I place my life in their hands. And it's only the same when you have a driving instructor or any kind of a flying instructor. I'm going to put my life in their hands, and I might not know anything about paramotoring. I could have seen a couple of videos, on YouTube, thought this is fantastic. I was going to say picked up the Yellow Pages. You've probably never heard of the Yellow Pages, have you, Daniel? But gone on Google. I sound old. Gone on Google, looked up paramotor training, come across Joe blogs, and just made the assumption that they have had the same professional training, as instructors do. Put my life and my hard-earned cash in their hands. And then find out that, that they don't have the right skills or experience to protect me as a student. And so that worries me. So I personally, I think that anybody who is taking money for instruction, that should be regulated. And I'm not one that's that keen on regulating the sport. I'm not a big believer in regulation. But I do think that instruction should be regulated, because, people are going to fall foul of bad, instructors who don't come under the right kind of professional scrutiny. Fair to say?
I do think that's fair to say. Specifically, the point about putting your life in someone else's hands. Their priority is probably going to be number one. That's themselves. That they're not in the sky. They should really be putting you as the priority, and that's a question you need to ask yourself, and not really a question someone might ask themselves, because they're so excited to get into the sport, that they might be just really ready to just throw the money at whoever and get flying, because it is exciting, don't get me wrong. And we've probably all experienced it, and especially both of us, buying equipment before you're you actually know about it or you're ready to fly.
That's right.
You just want something to show for it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there should be a level of scrutiny, especially with instructors, and to sort of preserve the sport as well, because it is deregulated. If a lot of people now decide to self-train, are they going to go to the extent to understand air law? Are they going to be breaking sort of air law, going into airspace that they shouldn't be in, especially military? Would bring the forces at B to look at paramotoring as a whole and sub 70 and say, right, do we need to put licenses into place here?
Yeah, that's right. And that, and there's the danger of that happening if something significant goes wrong. Our country has a history of knee-jerk reaction to things, and it would take, I hate to say it, it always sounds like extremist, but one paramotor to crash into a school. There, I've said it, using alarmism there. But it only takes one event like that, and then suddenly, you get all the do-gooders are going to crawl out of the woodwork. They're going to be petitioning, and before you know it, the hobby's going to be regulated, licensed. People are going to be making money out of it. It's going to cost us a lot more money. We'll have less freedoms and things like that. I'm a big believer in self-regulation. I'll tell you a good example of that, especially for anybody listening, any of our US cousins over there. So in the UK, sailing in the sea is unregulated. Yet we have one of the safest sea safety records in the world, yet we've got one of the most unsafe seas. The North Sea is quite a volatile, dangerous place. You don't survive very, very minutes at all if you fall overboard in the North Sea. But despite that, we have an extremely good safety record. And it's unregulated, but I won't say it's unregulated, it's self-regulated. So it's regulated, by clubs and by the people who enjoy the hobby and things like that. And that's what what I'd like to see with with paramotoring, that there's that degree of self-regulation, and I think part of that should be some actual regulation of instructors, the way that you also do with sailing. So if you want a sailing qualification, if you want to go away and get a day skipper qualification, you have to go to regulated to an authorized or an official instructor to get that qualification. And I think that's entirely just. And I think if we do that, we'll keep a high level of safety in paramotoring, and we'll protect our autonomy to be able to do this fairly freely. But you are right, it worries me, Daniel. It's like, especially here where I live in Lincolnshire, we're surrounded by airfields and things like that, and it's a minefield. There, that sounds, an airfield's a minefield, but it is, isn't it? Because some people don't even realise there's these things called air traffic zones and minimum flying heights and minimum heights over populated areas and all these kind of things, and they're just going to jump into a paramotor and break a lot of air laws, or even worse, end up in the turbines of one of the military jets at Waddington. Who knows, eh?
Yeah, I do agree with you. It is a bit of a minefield around where you live. I remember XCing over to yours, and you had to fly through a low flying corridor to get there, just through like 3 military airspaces, and through like want of not sounding like we're the police on paramotoring, and you should get training and all this. It's paramotoring is fun, and training will allow you to have fun safely for your own safety, the sport safety, and everyone else that's around you as well. I think it was Jeff Goen who said, wrote the quote, it's ours to lose. And it's so true.
Yeah.
We could lose paramotoring tomorrow if an incident happened.
Yes.
It was a bad enough one for the public's eyes to say, what are these guys doing? Why are they deregulated?
Yeah.
I do think it's going to get a little bit more tricky in the coming future with like drone highways and stuff like that for deliveries.
Yeah.
So it's important to know now that the training is going to be the way forward to keeping it viable option.
What's the most useful thing Do you think your instructors have taught you then, Daniel, when you were a student? And of course, we're still all students, you know. And but what do you think the most valuable lesson that you were taught was?
That is a very good question. I don't think I've stopped learning from my instructor, and I've been flying for a year and a half at this point, I think. Honestly, the initial lessons, I don't think are possibly the most important ones. Obviously, they get you flying and get you safely, but I think you actually start learning to fly when you're out there experiencing it for yourself.
Yeah.
Sort of specifically, I'm thinking about a time when I was actually out flying, and in a single flight, I had 2 instances, self-caused by myself, where I thought, actually, I need to rein myself back in here, because if I carry on flying like this, it's going to end up bad. So the instance I'm talking about, I wanted to launch. There was a lot of people out set up, and because of how the airfield was, I had to go to a much smaller runway position than I actually could have had, and ended up flying very close over like everyone else's vehicles and stuff. So it's a really bad launch. Luckily, I got away from that. And later on in that flight, I just sort of started to learn a foot drag, so having a bit of fun, and I actually clipped a tree. And there has been people suffer some very bad injuries and actually died from hitting trees. So yeah, your instructor is there to guide you in the best way. And I'm not trying to belittle training in any way in that sense, but I do genuinely think you learn best by doing it yourself. Your instructor should teach you everything you need to know, but you actually learn to fly when you start experimenting and making those mistakes, hopefully not bad mistakes for yourself.
Well, I think that's right. I think you've hit the nail on the head, because I don't think learning to fly is learning to fly. It's about giving you the lessons so you can go on and teach yourself to fly safely. So it's about, this is how you get into the air safely. This is what to do if things go wrong in the air. These are the things to look out for. Okay, we're going to show you how to handle a wing and thing. But now you're equipped with all that information to keep you safe. Now get out there and learn to fly. And I think that brings me in a circle to what I said earlier about what instruction is. It's all those things you don't think of. It's all those little lessons that, you don't think that matter. I mean, the question I asked you was, those little pearls that you learned, when you were being taught. One of the pearls I learned was, 3 attempts at launching and then stop. Because if you haven't got up after 3, you're going to hurt yourself at 4 or 5. And it's things like that I guess, you wouldn't be taught if you were self-taught. Obviously the dangers of water as well. I think, that's preached a lot on the internet and stuff now, but being within safe gliding distance of safety as well, that's one of those things that, again, if you just put a paramotor on your back and a wing, you might not automatically think about that. There's a few videos out there that will tell you about the dangers of that, but that was the first lesson I ever had. I mean, funnily, if I already knew about that anyway, because I have a PPL as well, Daniel. I used to fly light aircraft. I've not done much of it recently, and of course, that was always a concern. So you're always looking for your next landing zone, and you always want to be in a place in the sky where there is a landing zone for you. And you can guarantee the first time you position yourself in the sky where there is no available landing zone, if you have an engine out, you'll have an engine out. That's just Bastards law, is it? Or is it Sod's law? I don't know. It's the same thing.
Talking of engine out and having your instructor there. So I'm putting together another competition video, and it's of my actual learnings at the competition. So I learned a lot there. But I had an engine out on my first flight at the competition, and luckily Chili, my instructor, came along as well, so that it was really handy to have him there. And yeah, his sage advice was, you either look for a road and then you look for the pub. So if you have an engine out, road, and where's the nearest pub? Wait to be picked up after that. I think that's some pretty good advice.
Yeah. I think that's pretty sage advice, What about the use of videos then in learning? Is there a role for videos in learning, do you think?
Ooh, now, yes and no. I think it depends on where you're going with the videos. So in a sense of like learning to ground handle, for example, might be a good video, and there is a good video out there by Aviator, I believe, as well, about how to start ground handling.
Yeah, I've seen that.
But
it's good, yeah.
You're still missing that, having that person there with you, talking you through what you need to do, reassuring you that you're doing the right thing. And yeah, it can go from that degree to, there's videos out there to teach you how to do a wing over or a sat.
Yeah.
Which are much more advanced maneuvers, and they can go quite wrong. And actually, myself at the moment, I find myself looking at, how do you do wing overs? How do you do sats? Because I'm at the point in my flying where I'm like ready to go to the next thing. Whereas the right thing would probably be to go to an SIV and have someone who knows what they're doing tell you over a radio with a support boat over the ocean, so you're as safe as you can be.
Yeah, I would agree, because I think, sort of having carnal knowledge of acrobatic manoeuvres can be life-saving, and it definitely takes you to a next skill level. But the actual process of attaining that skill level is quite dangerous. So needs to be, I think, under the so the observation of somebody who has the right skills to be able to guide you in the right direction, tell you when to to throw that reserve shoot, that kind of thing. And that's what I would need. I need somebody to say, throw it now, Shaun, now, Shaun. Yeah, and that's what you need to hear, isn't it? I think if you do it on your own, I think you do set yourself up. It reminds me, mate, when I was young, when I learned to fly aeroplanes, I was 19 years old when I got my PPL. And like every 19-year-old, I was just full of bravado, thought I could do anything, thought I was indestructible. You've no idea how many hours of flying time I tried to do a loop-the-loop in a Cessna 152, which would have probably killed me if I'd have done it. And do you know what I think about it? I think, thank God I never actually pulled it off. I'd have probably pulled the wing off, and spiraled down to the ground and stuff. But, that's a younger version of the Fat Paramotor guy. Yes. So, I agree with you, mate. It's dangerous for that kind of thing. But if you're under instruction, again, I think videos can be, they can assist in the lessons that you're getting, I think, with an instructor, because it's nice to actually visualize and see things and watch them on video. And I think sometimes videos enthuse as well, don't they? When you see them, so they keep you enthusiastic and stuff. But we're back to preaching people on self-learning. I don't think I'd watch YouTube video and then go out and fly. Do you reckon, eh? You
could do it, but it wouldn't probably be safe. And it's just like it's just the same thing in my mind. Why wouldn't you just spend that money and get in the air quicker and safer? And it's a dangerous thing with YouTube and sort of the time we're sort of in at the moment now is that people are looking for views on their videos, so they're gonna likely give the information that people are looking for. How do you ground handle? Yes. How do you do this maneuver? Because that's going to get people to click on that video. They get views, and then also I believe that people in sort of like the time now is that you're invited to the idea that you can do anything you want to do, which I do believe is quite dangerous as well, because it sort of leads you into a false sense of hope when you see people pulling off these maneuvers or pulling off foot drags and stuff like that. And actually, it's until you actually start doing the flying side of things, you actually realise actually that's a lot more difficult than you actually first perceived it to be.
Yes, yeah. Things look good. Mate, I'll be honest with you. I used to watch Tucker Gott videos as well back in the day and stuff. And the only problem I have with Tucker Gott videos is Tucker Gott makes everything look like it's easy. And I can remember, I remember when I thought, that looks easy. You just put one of these parachutes on your bike, put a fan on it, and you just float around. And I almost thought that was paramotor. You could almost go to sleep, on a paramotor, and you could just float around the fields and stuff. And so it does. I couldn't believe how much hard work it was. I thought Tucker Gott doesn't make it look hard like this. He just floats off in his paramotor. So yeah, it does lead you into definitely into a false sense of security. I think when you watch some of these videos, and especially as you say, when the actual agenda behind the person making the video is really to get the hits, isn't it? And to get you in there, and then they might be reaping the rewards of sort of wannabe or armchair paramotor pilots. And what is worrying is you can buy some cheap gear. I've seen it. You could get it into your brain very, very easily that I could go out and buy this, 15-year-old wing, and this 20-year-old paramotor, and I'll watch this video and I could be flying next week. And I'd probably put it to people that the only flying you'll be doing is, flying along at about 70 miles per hour in the back of an ambulance. That's probably the flying you'll end up doing.
Myself, I fell into that as well. I bought a Solo 210, which you'd look at now and go, man, that is some outdated technology. They were water pumps to start with before they were aircraft engines.
Wrong. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it's technology's advanced. So yeah, you could quite easily pick up something.
Yeah, I'm relatively new to the sport, and I'm very inexperienced, really. But apparently, in fact, I know this because I've got an old wing Sigma 6, I think it is. Even the technology of the wings going back 15 years were nowhere near as easy to fly or as safe as the wings we have now. So the technology on wings has changed, immensely over years. So if you go out and buy a 15-year-old wing, you're already putting yourself, I think, at a significant disadvantage. The other thing I was going to mention as well, something close to my heart about, the idea of self-training and things. And I guess that's okay if you're 25 years old, as fit as a fiddle, fairly tough, you don't break very easily and things like that. But there is an increasing appetite for this sport amongst older, more infirm, fatter, coming from my point of view, cohort of people who are into paramotoring as well. The other advantage, I think, to training is that your instructor can help you work that out. They can work out, whatever sort of handicap you have towards flying. They can help sort of adjust that, and my instructor did that. He spent a lot of time with me trying to figure it out himself, because I was the heaviest pilot that Matt Fox had ever had, and he spent a fair amount of time hanging me, in paramotors, scratching his head, looking, deciding what he thought was right, and all that kind of business, and then adjusting what he did to get me flying. That kind of bespoke custom training comes from an experienced instructor. I don't think you get that from a YouTube video.
I reckon you could, but it would take many, many hours of watching and learning and understanding. Whether that's the right way to go about it, who knows? You might actually make the wrong decision after going through all that rigmarole of hang tests and buying different machines. You'd end up probably spending more money in the long run for that. But you say there's it's a growing number of people, who are getting older and bigger. But I think that, paramotoring is still quite an expensive hobby. And if I look at my statistics, especially on YouTube, the general sort of age of people is sort of around sort of 30s to sort of 50s. That's who's got the disposable income. I had to save up 2-3 years before I could afford to buy like a second-hand motor that would actually get me flying. I ended up getting a reasonably good deal, but it was through having time and not the money, and not the other way around, which it tends to be for newer pilots.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? It's been a while since I looked at my statistics. For a fair amount of time, I remember looking at my YouTube statistics, that the percentage of my viewers, not followers, viewers who were male was 100%. So I at one point I thought I must be quite sort of off-putting for the ladies. I think it's changed a little bit now. There's a few more ladies there, but I definitely seem to appeal to the middle-aged guys for some reason. That's a bit worrying, isn't it?
Well, we all want to appeal to the ladies, mate. But I think I think that given the sport is very male dominated, I think you're going to end up with that statistic anyway. It's a shame, really, because it is a sport for anyone to do, and I think why it's now making the shift towards more female pilots, which is great, is because the gear is becoming that much lighter. I think that was a big deal breaker back in the day, but I think that a lot more people are seeing that they can do it now, and why shouldn't they? They've got the choice. Why not?
I still don't kind of get that. My experience is being small as a male and slim and light is an advantage. You can end up like yourself, Daniel, with a little tiny atom and a 2-meter wing, and off you go. So I see, sort of the lighter you are is more of an advantage. So there's this part of me that actually thinks, to be honest with you, paramotoring probably suits the female form more than it does the male form, if we subscribe to the idea that women tend to be smaller and lighter than men physically. But so it's interesting why there's not more female pilots. Maybe it's because to fly a bedsheet with a fan on your back, you've got to be a bit stupid, and so, and men are more likely to be stupid. That probably could be it.
I mean, there's probably a big factor in it. Yeah,
that's right. Women are sat there thinking, "I ain't that fucking stupid."
It's either that, or they can see that all the men are out at the field and they just want their own space, which is understandable as well.
Yeah, that's right. It reminds me, watching Tucker videos, and I watched a video once. And Tucker got his girlfriend flying with him. What's her name? I forgot her name now. It's gone out my head.
Jacqueline, yeah.
Sorry, Jacqueline. And so Tucker took Jacqueline flying, and he could just tell. I can see the scenario now. He's like, "Hey, Jacqueline, I need to make another video. I haven't made a video this week. I've got this great idea. We'd take you flying again. Me and you will go flying, and I'll produce this video." And Jacqueline's like, "Oh, okay." And then so off they go, and Tucker's like, "Oh, this is great. Jacqueline's coming with me. Woohoo! This is fantastic and stuff." And Jacqueline's like, "Yeah, right." And they get into the air, and I think they're in the air about 15 minutes, and then Jacqueline's like, "I hate to be that guy, but I'm really cold." And Tucker's like,
"That's me."
Yeah, okay then, all right then. Have you seen them? We'll circle round and we'll land then. And I'm just thinking, Jacqueline thinking, I ain't into this shit. It's like, let me. This is what you do, Tucker. I'm going back to my motorbikes, and I remember seeing that, thinking, poor Jacqueline, she's just doing that for the video.
That's me. I'm the cold one. I absolutely hate the cold. But yeah, in terms of bringing your partner up with you to fly. I've got that idea in my head that someday I'll have a tandem rig and I'll be able to take my partner up. And I keep asking her the question, do you fancy it? And it's never a definitive yes, I'd like to go and do that. But she's open to the idea, which is a start.
My wife's never in a million years, you fat bastard. That's my wife, and it's like, do you fancy doing it? Nope, that's it. And it's just a complete full stop and thing. So I'm going to get nowhere with my wife at all. So I'm surprised. You say you hate the cold, but it was a bloody cold day the day you flew into Fat Paramotor HQ. That was a chilly day, yeah?
Yes. I think I was wearing 2 pairs of socks, 3 leg layers, and about 5 or 6 top layers with 2 pairs of gloves. I'm not one for the cold, mate.
Yeah, no. Is that why you drink tea when you're flying your paramotor?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, keep you warm. Makes you need a piss though. That's the only problem.
Yeah, well, so does the cold though, doesn't it? That gets to your bladder. But this is the thing that worries me the most about flying in the UK, because you have to realise that I learned to fly in Queensland in Australia. And it was funny. If I don't know, Daniel, whether you've ever watched some of my early videos and stuff and things like that, but Queensland's a strange place because the time to fly is when the sun comes up, and the sun comes up about 6 o'clock. But at night time in Queensland, in Brisbane, it's about 0 degrees, sometimes -1. But that's the time you have to fly when the sun comes up, because it goes from 0 degrees at 6 o'clock in the morning to 40 degrees at 10 o'clock, like about 4 hours. So when you used to go there, you were absolutely freezing, but you couldn't go and fly with all your thick clothes on and things, because it was only like, you get up there and 3/4 of an hour later, the sun would be beaming down and you'd be sweating. So I'm used to the hot weather. I don't think I'm going to cope very well with flying in the UK, and because I'm already a little bit tight in my harness, I think any additional clothing and things like that is going to make things a little bit more challenging.
You could always get one of those cocoon pods that they've got for paramotors now, which is like the old paragliding pods.
Oh, I didn't know. I've not seen those.
Keep your legs nice and warm.
Yeah, I've not seen those at all.
They look like a nice bit of kit. Yeah, probably make you a bit more aerodynamic. Yeah, a bit better on fuel as well.
Well, I've seen those with the with the paragliding. I had a look at those. I mean, when I learned to fly, again, slightly different model. As I said, in Queensland, you had to learn to paraglide before you learned to paramotor. It didn't mean you had to do any major paragliding, but at least you had to be able to jump off, a relatively shallow gradient hill and glide down to the bottom. Do you know what I mean? And that's how you were taught and stuff. But you had to learn to do that. And it's interesting. Have you never fancied that? Because a big part of me, I went there to learn to paramotor, but there was a big part of me that thought, you know what, this paragliding is really kind of cool. It's quiet, and you land so much more gracefully. You really do just sort of drop down on your toes, like an angel dropping out of the skies. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to do a little bit more, to be honest with you, but didn't get the opportunity. Ever thought about doing that?
Yeah, I have actually. I do want to take some paragliding lessons. I wanted to do it this year, but I don't think I'm going to have the chance with the things I'm doing. Just to sort of understand the air a bit more and thermals, and it's just like another aspect of flying, really, isn't it? I suppose you end up, whatever aviation you're in, you'll probably evolve it into something else at some point, or find an interest in something else as well. Because once you've tasted the air, it's quite addictive.
I think I enjoyed the kind of the silence of that. Paramotors can be quite noisy, can't they? Anyway, Daniel, listen, we've been chomping our chops now for well over an hour and things, and probably run out of things to say in this instant. Anything else you'd like to add before I kind of wrap things up here?
I think that's it. Get official training. Be safe. You'll be in the air quicker and more efficiently if you go to an instructor that's known in the community. That's the priority, I think.
Well, you've heard it from the horse's mouth there. That's what we think. We know what we're talking about, don't we, Dan?
Experts.
So just to let you know, yeah, we are the experts and things. You've been listening to the Fat Paramotor Podcast. Listen, if anybody's got any ideas about what you'd like to hear on this podcast, let us know. Send us some messages and things. If you want to be a guest here and you're interested, that would be great. So anyway, Daniel, thank you. Like I said, you've been listening to the Fat Paramotor Podcast. You've been listening to Daniel Jones. You've been listening to me, Shaun, the Fat Paramotor guy. And we'll catch you very, very soon, hopefully, on the next podcast. Bye for now.
See you all soon.
See you all soon.